Welcome back to Dan Abrams Live. I'm Brian Enton sitting in for Dan tonight. A newly released letter from the National Archives is revealing more about the scope of the FBI search of Mar-a-Lago and what led the National Archives to get the Department of Justice involved in their investigation as it tried to gather all the presidential documents moved from the White House to Florida when President Trump left office. The New York Times reports that the former president had more than 300 classified documents totaling some 700 pages at his Mar-a-Lago home. The former president's allies have said that the General Services Administration, the agency that manages federal property, not Trump's staff, packed the boxes with the documents. The National Archives says they spent much of 2021 trying to retrieve documents from Trump. Officials knew some items were missing, including a note that former President Obama left for his successor. Now remember, under the Presidential Records Act, all official material, regardless of classified status, remains government property after a president leaves office. Late last year, former President Trump went through the boxes of documents at Mar-a-Lago. Multiple sources have told the Times. Then in January, nearly a year after Trump left office, the former president turned over 15 boxes to the National Archives, including 150 documents marked as classified. A source says the boxes contain documents from the CIA, National Security Agency, and the FBI on multiple topics of national security interest. The National Archives then alerted the Justice Department, believing there to be more documents at Mar-a-Lago. The same month, after interviews, sources say the DOJ issued a subpoena for the rest of the classified material that was being held at Mar-a-Lago. And in April, Trump's lawyers requested that the National Archives delay telling the FBI what was in the documents, citing executive privilege against the Biden administration. The acting archivist denied that request. The letter dated May 10th was released by the National Archives just this afternoon. Meanwhile, on June 3rd, Trump aides turned over dozens more documents. Sources say a lawyer for Trump went through the boxes himself to identify classified materials, and that Trump even met with investigators himself briefly during their visit to Mar-a-Lago. Trump attorney Christina Bobb signed a statement saying she believed all classified material was removed from Mar-a-Lago. But after interviews with some in Trump's inner circle, investigators realized that there were other presidential records that had not been turned over. Then on June 22nd, the DOJ subpoenaed Mar-a-Lago security video that showed a hallway outside the area where the documents were stored. Sources say the video showed people walking through the busy hallway with boxes, even appearing to change the containers that some of the documents were stored in. The feds say there isn't much control at Mar-a-Lago over who enters as a guest. It's a club. People come and go. That surveillance video, combined with witness interviews, led the Justice Department to draft a request for a search warrant. And we all know what happened next. August 8th, the FBI searched Mar-a-Lago, collecting 26 boxes of documents, including 11 sets of material marked as classified. One set had the highest level of classification. It's called top secret, sensitive, compartmented information. The Justice Department investigation is continuing, which suggests that the DOJ officials still don't know if they have recovered all of the documents that Trump took with him when he left the White House. The search warrant was released to the public August 12th. Then yesterday, the federal judge who signed the search warrant formally rejected the DOJ's request to keep the affidavit sealed. He has ordered the department to submit redaction requests by this Thursday. And also yesterday, Trump's legal team asked a federal judge to appoint what's known as a special master, a third-party attorney who would ensure that the Justice Department returns private documents that may have been taken during the FBI search. They are also asking that the investigation be halted until the special master is put in place. They want a more detailed receipt of what was seized and are requesting that any documents taken that was not within the scope of the search warrant be returned. And this afternoon, a judge in Florida requested more information about the Trump team's complaint. They have until Friday to provide more details about what the lawyers want the judge to do specifically and how it actually affects the efforts to unseal the affidavit. Joining me now is Tom Dupree, former Principal Deputy Assistant Attorney General during the George W. Bush administration. Thank you so much for being here, Tom. We just went through the whole timeline. It has been a hell of a couple of weeks with everything going on. I read through the letter today from the National Archives very, very carefully. Some of it's very, very complicated, a lot of legalese. But what was interesting to me is this back and forth between the National Archives and Trump's people was going on for so long, this back and forth about the classified documents. What I'm wondering is, at the end of all of this, Tom, is this all really just going to be about classified documents, or is there something big that we don't know?
Well, I think it is going to be about classified documents or national security documents. But I think if you're in the shoes of the Trump legal team, you have to be worried that this investigation is taking on a life of its own. And as we've learned from, scandals going back to Watergate, as they say, it's not always the crime, it's the cover up. And so I think if I'm in the choose the Trump legal team, I'd be worried not just about the initial removal of these documents to Mar-a-Lago, but I'd also be concerned just about the interactions that my lawyers and other people working on my behalf have had with the Justice Department and other federal agencies. I think the letter released today from the National Archives really starts to fill in some of the gaps on the timeline and explains precisely why the Justice Department and other investigators were getting increasingly concerned about the documents being housed at Mar-a-Lago.
What I find confusing, and I think 99.9% of people don't understand, and maybe you can explain this to us, is that it says former President Trump claimed executive privilege against the current president. What does that mean?
Well, that's what's puzzling everyone.
Yeah.
Executive privilege, basically, it's a rule of law that enables the president to shield from disclosure communications with his close advisors. The reason it exists is to allow the president to have communications in confidence with his trusted advisors. I think what's a little bit unusual about this assertion of executive privilege is two things. One is it's an open question whether a former president can assert executive privilege. No question a current sitting president can do so. Not as clear with regard to a former president. The second perplexing aspect of this is that President Trump is apparently trying to assert executive privilege against the executive branch.
Right.
Typically, when a president asserts executive privilege, it's to shield documents from Congress, from the judiciary, from some other actor. But here, it's the current executive branch, the Justice Department, that's saying, we want these documents. And so you have a former executive asserting executive privilege against the current executive.
Something else I found interesting, it says the executive branch, it seems to be saying that these documents could actually put President Biden at risk. At least that's the way that I read it. It said, quote, could cause potential damage to current President Biden. How does that come into play here?
The only way I make sense of that is that the documents potentially could involve, and release of this information could potentially jeopardize ongoing executive branch programs, whether that's our intelligence gathering efforts, whether it's counterintelligence programs, whether it concerns particular military or national security or defense programs that are ongoing right now. The current president obviously has a very significant interest in keeping that information confidential.
Interesting. Yeah, there's still so much we don't know. I'm glad I'm not, even you are confused reading some of this, so that makes me feel better. Tom Dupree, thanks for coming on with us tonight. We appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for watching. Go to newsnationnow.com to find NewsNation on your cable provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.